All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Coding Temple's Agile Leaders, where we help product and tech leaders execute and innovate in these rapidly changing times with more confidence and velocity. I'm your host, Evan Shai. Today, we are joined by my friend, Greg Loughnane, the co-founder and CEO of AI Makerspace, where him and his incredible team are building the world's leading community for building production LLM applications. So this episode is for the technologists out there looking to push the bleeding edge of AI in their organization. Thank you so much for being here, Greg.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Evan. It's awesome to be here with you.
Well, I have the pleasure of knowing a little bit about your background and how impressive it is and why you are my go-to source for everything related to AI, but maybe you can share a little bit about your journey with the audience here.
Yeah, in 2015, I graduated with my PhD. It was in optimization at the time. And part of the reason I even got it was because I kind of loved teaching. And I started doing that as an undergrad. So quickly kind of came out of school, got into government contracting, consulting, and started working with teams to commercialize tech. And that kind of led me into liking the startup vibe more than big companies. And I found it was very hard to make money with research. And even though, I started to do some consulting outside of government contracting with actual startups, I found it was really still hard to make money with AI at the time, 16, 17, 18. You're kind of doing a lot of sort of just research for the CTO, and you're kind of taking this work that you do and you're throwing it over the wall of the engineering team, and it often dies on the vine. This kind of pushed me more and more towards trying to get inside and build something with a team, towards product management. So I kind of went to entrepreneurship school, dabbled in some startups that weren't mine. All along I'm teaching, and then COVID hits, and I realized, man, online teaching and learning is this is the future. I have got to get into this. I've always loved teaching. It's never really paid, but I got the feeling at the time this is what I should be focused on. 2020, I actually take a full-time job teaching. So I'm teaching 5 days a week. I'm trying to become the best at online teaching and learning. And, there was a big opportunity because still most people have never been to a Zoom room that's really, really well run. It's not a thing that people have experienced, but it can be done. And, this is something I've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years. I tried to launch a course back then, teaching people 3D printing. It was a disaster. I didn't really know what I was doing. Headed out to Silicon Valley to sort of learn startups, learn the industry of ed tech, understand boot camps. This kind of got me into a role at a company called Fourth Brain, which is very close to deep learning AI, and got me kind of close to a lot of people that are kind of at the top of the industry. I looked around and I realized this is what I want to be doing, building these boot camps, but this sort of VC product, VC backed ed tech boot camp business model, it's not quite right. And so, after ChatGPT came out, 2023, I realized, man, this is the year. I want to do this a little bit better than I've ever seen anybody do it. This kind of led to what AI Makerspace has become today. So we're building boot camps out on the edge of what's possible with open source, and that's LLMs today in production.
I love it, man. I knew there were some similarities in our journey, but I didn't quite appreciate how much. I guess I've been an entrepreneur my entire career, but did some time in academia, if you will. I was in a PhD program and was publishing research and realizing how far of a distance or gulf there was between the work we were publishing and the impact I was having on people's lives, and ended up trying to do skill development, building applications to deliver that skill development to make a bigger impact in people's lives. And then, a lot of philosophical alignment in terms of how can we do that better, and ultimately brought both of us here, I think. Were there any skills that were kind of most transferable from that past life into more of the operator seat, product leader seat?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I look across all of it, it's kind of like this this willingness to sort of like attack one thing as hard as you can at each period. Like, so it kind of is like resilience is number one. It's kind of like cookie cutter thing, but like, like I was deeply underemployed for long stretches, throughout this journey. And it's just part of like continuing to just smash the grind. But each sort of skill I learned along the way, like doing research, very, very important if you're going to do consulting, right? And then building a startup, actually the way you build it out to begin with and find product market fit and figure out what you should be building is like kind of through consulting. And so like, each of these things kind of stacks on each other. And then it was very, very helpful to go sort of get the broad perspective of entrepreneurship school, dabble a little bit of this and that. And then as a CEO, I'm finding I go back to some of that, okay, I have a CFO day. I got to go pick up how do I actually do the balance sheet stuff. Okay, I have this kind of day. And I think that's been, it's just kind of all come together because the startup CEO is kind of an everything job. So you kind of have to stack it one piece at a time.
Amen, man. Even something as seemingly singularly constrained to science or research, but just the scientific method or running experiments appropriately and developing hypotheses. And it always doesn't have to be this like perfectly elaborate experiment, but even just thinking in ways where you can actually test hypotheses or expose where you're wrong, I think is a useful thing for a lot of entrepreneurs who are trying
That's
to
right.
move
That's
forward.
right. And I think like even I've talked to, mentors of mine, whatever, it's like this idea that what is your hypothesis? Because the thing about business is like, you have to figure out what's true about your customers. You have to figure out what's true about what's going wrong in your company. You have to, and it's like the opposite of sort of like the getting emotional about it and whatever you feel about it. And so you've got to be able to say, okay, and the decision-making framework of the hypothesis is very useful because otherwise, like if you're trying to think about everything and how it engages and interacts, like you can't make any decisions. It's like, this is the hypothesis. This is how I'm going to test it. And it's very, very, it's exactly that in business. Yeah. You have to have the scientific method, 100%.
Like, let's get to the truth as fast as possible because we're going to get there one way or another. And like, let's not pay a toll for the detour, So kind of leaning back on, I guess, some of your consulting work and then now what you're seeing with technologists and technical leaders inside enterprises, obviously a lot of organizations, most probably organizations are starting to really look at AI and recognize that there are meaningful implications that this is going to have on our business. But what do we ultimately do about it? What is the strategy? How do we actualize that strategy and create value for the organization? Is there a common thread or a primary set of challenges that you see technology leaders face when implementing AI strategies in their organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to sort of break down the industry into its component parts and you have to break down the technology at the same time. So, in industry, you're going to prototype things and then you're going to put them into production. On the technology side, we really want to kind of differentiate between AI, sort of classical machine learning, deep learning, and then this sort of generative AI that we're talking about when we talk about large language models. Of course, there are many, many fine lines there, but from a what you should be building for your customers' perspective, you want to understand, okay, top level, yes, I need to go from prototype to production. Yes, I need to understand AI versus generative AI, but what your customers want and what is going to make their lives easier. And like part of the thing is, and part of the dirty little secret is like, well, most products today that are built do not actually require AI. And, of the ones that do require AI, most of them do not require generative AI. So you end up, when you go and you take I'm only going to create business value for my customer's perspective, you end up kind of taking this unsexy approach of saying, well, maybe I'll just do sort of classic product management. Maybe I'll do more classical AI product management. But the board's asking about LLMs. Everybody wants to know what we're doing with LLMs. ChatGPT came out. Everybody's freaking out. What are we doing about it? It's important to have something there. And it's important to start moving down this prototyping to production pathway. And so this is where I'll sort of leave the classical AI aside.
Okay.
And talk about generative, because that's what people want to hear about today. And I think one of the things is there are companies that are good at prototyping already. They're great at it, and they're sitting there and they're like, we got these prototypes, we're dangling the candy in front of people that are in the company. They're like, man, what are we waiting for? Let's push these things to production. Let's scale them out. These are amazing applications, and there's a real hang up there in production. So these are the financial industries. This is the insurance industry. These are the guys that have a all digital product, right? So it's all digital. It's all about the data. It always has been. Quants are the OG ML and AI people. Totally. The making money off of making money has always kind of led the way here. And so these industries that build products based on that idea are still very much leading the way. And so, when I talk to folks from industries like that, what you end up hearing, well, a lot of these challenges of going to production, the infrastructure for LLMs in production is different than the infrastructure for AIs in production, classical AI in production. And by the nature of the large language models. And so you end up like having to figure out how to get new tools. And there are a lot of these open source edge tools that they're not well supported. So in production, right, if something breaks at 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, who are you going to call to make sure that you can fix it? And if the answer is I don't have anybody to call, well, we don't want to go to production then. And this is a very important gap right now in the industry that we're going to continue to try to create some value for folks in that space. Is one of our key strategic goals of this year. So because we believe that's the open source edge. Now, most people are not there. All right. Most people are back in the prototyping phase. And in the prototyping phase, you have to sort of decide, what should I be building? Why? How am I going to leverage tools like prompt engineering, like fine tuning, like retrieval augmented generation, RAG? If you can't sort of intelligently even speak about these topics, let alone how they relate to one another and how they come together holistically to create an app that has human level performance, that's aligned with your customers, that's giving a great experience, that's not going to get you in trouble, then you're not very good at prototyping yet. And you should be spending your energies and your focus there. So, I think what you have to do is you have to look across your organization. You have to be real honest about how mature are we from a technological standpoint. Some industries are just less mature. Manufacturing, defense, they tend to move slower, and that's okay. Some other industries feel the heat of competition. The insurance, right? The financial, they're like, if we don't get on this, we're out of business, right? So if you have to look at your industry, you have to look at your actual executive team and the capabilities you have from a data science and machine learning perspective now, and you have to start building on that wherever you are. And whatever that looks like is going to be different for your particular situation, but it always starts with proof of concepts and prototypes. It always moves into production, and you're always going to have to make that differentiation between classical machine learning, deep learning, and generative AI, and no AI at all. So sure. It's tough to answer the question in general, but that's my best right there.
It's a very, very useful framing and mental model that helps kind of bifurcate and organize the different contexts that businesses, or maybe the different phases that businesses are ultimately in. And there are interesting points in both elements. I guess let's start with do you have a general sense or pulse, at least even anecdotally, just based on your experience, where do the majority of businesses fall right now in the production phase or the prototyping phase?
Vast majority of businesses are stuck in prototyping. Very, very few businesses that I've spoken to are actually out, they're like, yeah, we get it. We understand how to use all the latest and greatest tools. We're building it. Our people understand it. The thing is, we have these sort of other infrastructure, security, whatever issues that are halting me now from creating massive value with these tools tomorrow, right? And so like that's the edge. Most people are somewhere getting started, 1, 2, 3 POCs, prototypes. You really have to sort of maybe get 5 or 10 that actually really worked and you want to go to production with. So it's kind of a long road from starting POCs to being ready to rock and roll.
Totally get that. All right, so we'll spend a meaningful amount of time in that kind of earlier phase and how you go about approaching it to hopefully create as much downstream value for customers as possible. Although I will say that you really nicely elucidated some seemingly inevitable challenges that companies will face on the production side of it, particularly as it relates to skill gaps and capacity planning and all of that, to ensure that they're not only able to launch it in production, but maintain it and continue to iterate on it,
Yeah, oh yeah. The iteration is a whole nother piece.
Yeah,
right.
Okay, so we're in the earlier part of the journey as a company, really evaluating. Okay, we have some early hypotheses about how we can create value for customers. I guess are there frameworks with which you would advise product leaders or technical leaders to utilize out of the gate to ensure that they are consistently orienting around customer value and not kind of getting distracted by shiny objects?
Yeah, I would start with, your last quarter, your last year's strategy. And, it's like, well, what are some of the initiatives that you have on there that could potentially be augmented with some of these newer technologies? Like that's sort of easiest, lowest hanging fruit. And then one of the other things is, that I recommend to people is like, go around to, your functional department head, your functions, your departments, whatever. You go around and you ask people to lead them. It's like, what are some things that your people like complain about having to do all the time that are pretty monotonous? Like, what are the things that, and you're often like, it's customer support, right? It's the same question I'm answering over and over. It's the same freaking pipe I'm fixing 10,000 times. And the different maintenance person has to figure it out exactly the same way, even though it's already been done 15 times before. It's like, where are you not transferring that sort of learned experience and knowledge to the next person, the next person, the next person? And how can you sort of automate that? Or what questions is HR getting on, policies constantly, right? These sort of question answering systems are a great sort of framework and mental model to use. Like, where are people asking questions that you get the same answer over and over, right? And that to me is probably the place to start is what's bothering people about what they have to spend time on. That's sort of an internal application thing. What questions are you answering for customers over and over and over? That's sort of the number one external application thing. And then, look in your own strategy. Maybe you can start there and see what you can come up with.
I love that. The internal focus first feels like, to your point, low-hanging fruit, safer, more reliable. By definition, you can talk directly to the customer. The customer is part of your organization, so probably a safer space to be. And you capture some fast wins, and you start to develop more confidence in the muscle and in the technology, and you could probably build on that to some degree.
Yeah. And I think like one of the classic ones, even from classic AI, was like the auto quoting sales tool, right? It's like, why are we still manually quoting people? Like, but can you actually build something that your sales team wants to use is the real question, right? Not that you're like forcing them by hook and crook to sort of like, no, you have to pick this up, otherwise. And so are you actually building things that people want? It's much easier to test inside too.
It always matters, man. Is this something people actually want? And the best way to find out is to go talk to them. It's amazing how challenging that can be sometimes, though. Before we dive into some more specifics around data-centric approaches and whatnot, overall, do you have a sense of where you think there are real competitive advantages in AI for businesses? I sense that, maybe to some degree it looks very similar to how it's historically looked, or where advantages or value opportunities already exist with customers. Is that kind of your position? Are there nuances to that?
Yeah, I mean, like one use case that jumps out to me today for enterprise, for large businesses is, one thing we like to do is we like to go and do events for people, and we'll go and we'll open up their webpage and we'll show that their webpage chatbot is just absolutely garbage, right? They will ask it a question. We'll be like, hey, can you answer this simple question of this policy that is clearly on your website and I can find on the other page? And it literally can't answer the question. And you're like, what's the point of this thing? And the answer is baked into whatever sort of website creation thing that you used. And that's sort of the stats of these chatbots.
Yeah.
But so it always goes back to chatbots, right? So it's like what you can do today is you can build a simple retrieval augmented generation system. You can web scrape your own website, and you can build this thing independent of your website as a question answering AI that returns a coherent answer and also returns you specific links to exact reference information and documentation where you found it. Now, this is sort of level one.
Okay.
But what you want to think about is when your customer asks a question into a live chat, what's the person actually doing? They're coming in and they're saying, well, let me see, what exactly have we done with Evan before? Let me look and see what products has he bought for us? How many times he's called support? What's Evan in his general demeanor towards us like? How should we be engaging with him? What could we potentially upsell, or what could we potentially do right now to make his life a little bit easier or better? Like, this is a complex sort of meta problem amongst all possible Evans and Gregs that people have ever had in their customer base, right? And the thing is, like, if you don't go and you don't start building your own solution to this today, what's going to happen is